I was the designer and came up with a complete concept. I built all the I don't know what it's called now. All the TRS, like the skin, like the estilo and
details.
Details. Yeah,
Access?
like Alex Broscow's skate, Frankie Morales' skate, Tori Treeskeeter's skate, the estilo, the alpha, all the skin, that whole skin concept with the base plates and the midsole, and that was all me.
So
and I would, yeah.
how did that go into, like, was it solely you? Was it your idea to put a skin on a skate like that? Because that was one of the first, if not maybe the first, that has skin skate.
Yeah. So I modified an idea. Terry Lamont, like when everyone was skating Rossi's, everyone used to start it off like Josh Petty, and everyone started like, kind of stuffing the skate, and they had an extra tongue. And it was when everyone was rocking the Fifth Element, and they would puff the tongue out a little bit. And then we started doing that with, the rollerblade skate, like me and Santi and Fabiola. And we started I modified all the skates in my house. I would like grind things. We put all the 50-50 frames. I put, like, for Jason Marshall, I totally modified and like custom made negative grind spots so he could do internal grinds and, like all that kind of stuff. And so I was like the shoe doctor of skates for a period of time, where I kept making all these kind of cool things. And then I got picked up by Rollerblade and was skating for them and traveling. And then we went over to Montebelluna, over outside of Venice in Italy, to go, because that was, at that time, Rollerblade was owned by Benetton Sports Group.
Mm-hmm.
And we went over there, and they took us to their facility, and they owned Technica, Atomic skis, and like Benetton and a couple other brands. They had all these brands, and they were all housed in like this Italian villa. And so we went there, and at that time, the Europeans had a much bigger marketing budget than we really had in the States, because we were still selling like the Swindlers and the Dirks and stuff like that. And it had been like, I want to say creeping up on 6 years since we had made a mold change. And so we would go out on tour, and we would like, we would have like things like, oh, whoever can do the best grind gets a new pair of skates. And I remember it was like, we went to give the kids skates, and they're like, can I get something else? And I was like, fuck, really? I'm like, you don't want a free pair of skates? And they're like, oh, I don't really like those. I was like, oh. And so they had just came out with those kind of weird skates. Randy skated for us. I think Louis skated for us. Eric Shrine skated for us. Eric Burke skated for us. And we were all like over there. And there was like this real big disconnect. And I basically spoke, because I was a little bit older than everyone, I spoke skater, right? So we would sit down in these big meetings, and they'd be like, man, this shit's whack. Like, and the Europeans, the Italians were like, what is this whack? I don't understand. What do you mean whack? And so I'd be like, well, what they're saying is the aesthetics of, it's not an urban aesthetic. The color schemes are a little dated. Like I basically could.
You're really translating.
Yeah, straight up a translator.
Right? Yeah, you're really like, so what they're trying to say by it's whack, the aesthetics aren't really that good.
Well, yeah, exactly. So they would be like, okay, and they're like,
That's
well,
awesome.
what do you guys want? And so I would ask everybody like, what do you want? And they're like, I want something like kind of like this and kind of like that. It should be like, more like a shoot, like, when you show up, you want to look dope, like, and I'm like, okay, so I'm like. So I start sketching things, right? And then this concept, I go in and I pitch this idea, and I'm like, well, like, we need to change the way it looks. And they're like, to make that one change is going to cost $600,000.
What?
Right. It was for molds, right? Because it was left, right, and they had sizes like every size or every size and a half. And so like to make a change to the molds, it was like $30 to $40,000 per size, mold. Right? Oh. And so they're like, we can't do that. And so we basically kept skating the same skates and just changing the color every once in a while because they wouldn't make the investment. And so I'm a problem solver. So I was like, in my brain, I was like, all right, so we can't change it because it's going to cost too much. So what can we change? I'm like, they could always change the liners. I'm like, how much does it cost to change liners? And they're like, oh, we can change that. If that's just it's really easy. It doesn't cost that much because we don't have molds for that. So I said, what if we use all of the internal, or we use all of the molds for the internal structure, and we replace it by putting a shoe covering or sock over the top, because people had already been like cutting the front off of shoes and then like
like the puff.
Yeah, but people would actually cut off the whole front of the shoe and then like super glue it down to, and so your skate had the function up here, but then it kind of had this thing, but it could get pulled off or straight. And so I basically came up with this idea, and I built it. I built the prototype in my garage, and I like made it with like high-end leathers and all this stuff, and basically brought it to them and was like, I want to make something like this. And they were immediately like, well, no, it's impossible. It's impossible. It's impossible. And then as they started doing it, I'm like, yeah, but every time we want to change a skate, we only have to change this one part. And then they were like, oh. So they're like, well, we'll give it a try. And it was their best-selling skate. It was their best-selling aggressive skate for quite a while.
No way. That's cool to hear the backstory of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I never even thought about that backstory, that was probably the first skin aggressive skate. And that's awesome that it came about that way too. And I never thought about the numbers behind it too, how it makes sense for people to do that, or companies to do that to save money.
Yeah. I mean, it's because basically a skate came from a ski boot or an ice skate, right? And when they had the molds on the outside, the mold isn't really aesthetic. It's only for deforming slightly as you lean forward to disperse the energy, right? Because your feet and legs can only handle so much. So if you use that, that's the reason why, like, you know, all of us like to have smaller skates, but it's harder to have smaller skates because you got to wear the bigger size so that you can fit that big ass liner in there. So trying to figure out how to do all that and make it look small has always been an issue, right? And K2 did a really good job being able to have smaller sizes and stuff like that, making it look cool. But then they always have problems with the deforming and breaking the rivet on the side because it's handling a lot of pressure and there's only cloth there, right? And if you're 5'4" and you weigh 110 pounds, that's not a big problem. But as you start getting bigger, as they started scaling, that's why people always had that weird kind of like pigeon toe walk, because their legs would bow out, right? Especially because we always, like, as we do soles, you always kind of lean that way anyway. So then next thing you know, people are skating like, you know, like a duck.